The great Jeff Kaplan visited two streamers yesterday that were at the Blizzard headquarters and the streamer residency. Both Fran and Emong got to talk to the game director of Overwatch, and they discussed a variety of topics that we're going to break down here. But first, if you don't already, be sure to go in the links below to check out and follow Fran and Emong. They're great streamers, sometimes they even play together. Both of them are very good-natured and entertaining. I mean, Emong recently has been really off the rails, been rapping while he's been playing badly. I tuned into his stream the other day and I was laughing immediately, but you can check the links in the description to see the full interviews on their Twitch pages. But here I'm going to condense the subject matter that spanned both interviews and take it point by point. New stuff coming, the problems with ranked, and more. Let's get the good news out in front. Jeff all but confirms there will be a new archives mode. He sort of sheepishly said there might be something cool on the horizon and told us to act surprised when it comes. Jeff is always very particular with his word usage. More than likely, this is an entire new story-type mission. In the first year cycle, we got the Uprising mode, which put us in King's Row during the Omnic Uprising, and then Retribution was the moment that Reaper went too far, disobeying the orders of Overwatch, killing a bad guy he was supposed to apprehend, signaling the downfall of the Black Watch squad. Now, I would suspect them to go one of two routes. Either they teleport us to an entirely different scenario to play out a parallel timeline with all of these other past events that we've been discussing, or they continue down the Reaper plotline. And with so many hints to Reaper, connecting so many thread lines, you guys know that I really think he'll be the focal point sometime in the future. We've seen both in the older comics, the Christmas one especially, but also just recently with the short story, that Reaper's descent into darkness and losing his family, however that happened, is currently unknown. And at least from where I'm sitting, the next big plot point to go down with the Overwatch lore is to continue beyond the schism between Blackwatch and Overwatch to follow through to when it full-on started to collapse. So I think this one might be about the downfall of Overwatch, because we already know what sparked it. Other new stuff, we're definitely getting more comics. I thought it was odd, but Jeff said that they wanted to set a higher quality bar to make them better, which is almost to indicate that they weren't very happy with them. And I'm not a big comic reader, I never was. Don't worry, I'm into plenty of other incredibly nerdy stuff, but never was my thing, so I don't know how to judge it in comparison to the level of other comics that exist, but it seemed good to me, especially the artwork was always very solid. The storylines weren't necessarily dense, but I don't think that's something that you should expect anyway. So I'm not really sure what they're looking to improve, but with them finally announced now, I think we know what the new writer that signed on quite a long time ago has been working on all this time. It'd be nice to start seeing these roll out with some regularity. More new stuff before we get on to some of the more sour topics, unfortunately. If you remember, Jeff mentioned at BlizzCon that they had 6 new heroes that they were working on almost simultaneously, but one they're plucking out, Hero 30, is very far along at this point, and the final model of the character is done, progressing very well, and they're very pleased. Jeff also seemed to indicate that they're not going to be increasing the number of heroes that they're releasing anytime soon, so if last year's anything to go by, we should see Hero 30 get onto the PTR by the end of February, to then be released a few weeks later into March. Now we're going to be moving on to some less exciting news, so I hate to break it to you, prepare to be somewhat disappointed on these next few announcements. When asked about the guild system that a lot of the player base wants, the answer Jeff gave essentially is this: because the only way they want to do it is to incorporate it Battle.net-wide rather than just be for Overwatch, it requires every other development team to dedicate resources to help them do that. And because how it would have to interact with all of these other different games and software, it's one of the most complicated features they can develop. Because of this, there's no timeline on guilds coming in the near future, or at all, I guess. He said it would be on the far horizon. And he says, quote, "I don't know if we'll ever end up doing it." But despite all of that, he also says they have really big ideas that we've never heard anybody talk about. So that means if they were to do it, it would be super awesome, but it's almost never coming. This is some serious hard to get playing Jeff is doing right now. It's toying with my heart, and I don't know if I can handle any more of this. I think we should see other people. No, I'm just kidding. I can't quit you, Jeff. Now, the last two sections are about the balance of the game and ranked. Saving that one for last because obviously we talk about it it a lot. Now, Jeff makes a few comments about some of the early worries people have about D.Va being overly nerfed or Reaper being overly buffed, and this is what he says. At lower levels of play, the D.Va nerfs won't be very noticeable, but at higher levels of play, it will definitely make a difference because higher level players are much better at punishing you when abilities are on cooldown. And as for Reaper, he essentially said that they wanted to buff him so that tanks can never take over the game again. Majorly paraphrasing there, but his quote is Reaper should be a natural counter to tanks, and that it's undeniable that Goats was a part of the patch that they just put out, outwardly saying it's essentially to kill Goats before Overwatch League. Now, to people worrying that Reaper is going to be too strong, Jeff tries to quell some of these fears by saying he's very counterable. And to not take up too much time in this section, I'll let you know I will make a full video reviewing the patch in more depth, so don't worry. But I want to drop this little nugget. A lot of things could be counterable. That doesn't make them good to play against for all players. When Doomfist was incredibly strong just a patch or two ago, very counterable. In fact, pros said, well, even Lucio can contest him. He's not a big problem. But they also felt that that needed a nerf. And Goat's comp is technically counterable too, as is Brigitte. Brigitte being functionally unkillable at close range, I think, is a big part of that as well. Having a character that gets in on you and feeling absolutely helpless. Well, for my money, Reaper has just switched places with Brigitte, and not in a good way. Yeah, it definitely makes Reaper viable in situations where he otherwise wasn't, but now we have a new character that if you see in close range, run for your life because they're going to get a free kill on you unless you pull off a big play. But more on that in future videos. And funnily enough, on the topic of balance, Jeff Kaplan has quite the saucy little rant, and we've always loved it anytime Jeff Kaplan gets a little cheeky, but he actually says, what the hell do you people want? Go play mystery heroes if you want random heroes all the time. Of course there's going to be a top level meta because the top level competition is always going to be looking to optimize play, and not everything is going to be optimal all the time. It's just the nature of things. He says every single meta we've ever had, eventually the players hate it. Now, it's a bit disingenuous here because he says bar arbitrary restrictions, there's no way to keep a lot of heroes meta, and there is a way. It's called hero bans. It's the driving force for hero diversity in many other games, and without it, Jeff Kaplan is most definitely right that there will always be the top 6 to 10 maybe heroes that get played. Whereas if there's targeted hero bans in order to protect your own weaknesses or attack an enemy teams, and we're talking at the pro level here, remember, then the pro level pick rates go all over the place. Being able to choose which style you play in lets you change the meta from game to game, so to speak. Okay, enough on bans, obviously. You guys know we think this is an incredibly important thing that they should add for the top level competitive play to actually function, in my opinion, because otherwise we are just going to be going on this merry-go-round of balance from patch to patch, chasing our own tails, trying to keep up with the way the game changes. But enough on balance, let's get into talking about ranked. So far into the video, I hope you would be able to deduce that that means we're not getting any real good news here, bar the fact that they're finally admitting publicly that they're not happy with it. Jeff Kaplan says, we're not super happy with competitive play. That's a good start, because you guys don't know this, but when we were at BlizzCon, we had an interview with two very talented developers that we ended up not publishing because, frankly, we wanted to ask them questions that they realistically weren't equipped to, and gave us answers like, we are happy with ranked, which now the game director few months later is saying the exact opposite. So the small good news is they're working on some of these things. The bad news is they've confirmed that nothing is coming for quite a long time. So what are they actually looking to do? Doesn't say, but based on some of his responses, we can get some hints of what direction they're at least talking about. So he says, we have a lot in the works. It's very complicated. Big changes to competitive require changes to the matchmaker, and that's just an entirely complicated machine. They have big ideas, but those ideas take big time. And they discuss something that may have been one of the big ideas that they're looking into. Emong even asks about a role queue with role-specific SR, because of course, even a GM player like Emong, mostly plays tank, is not the same rank when he picks Widow. He's better than he says he is, but who's really to say, unless we were able to test ourselves by playing the different roles dedicated to different SR sets, so we know where we rank on each of the different roles. Surprisingly enough, Jeff Kaplan is a big fan of this idea, but does say that not everyone is, meaning that there isn't full agreement on the Overwatch dev team on if that's even feasible or a good idea. I mean, who knows? Maybe the finance department says that would cut down on Smurf account purchases, so maybe that's a bad idea. Who knows what the reason is, right? But funnily enough, he does say it's nice when you're Hanzo main, queued to play Hanzo, and is accurately ranked as Hanzo. He's not a Mercy main, which I'm sure is a quote that is going to be taken out of context. Come on, we know what he means, even if it is worded a little funny. That would be be a change I would definitely sign up for, even if it locks a 2-2-2. Jeff Kaplan even goes into detail to explain this as a problem, and he says, one of the biggest challenges in competitive, more often than not, people want to win. It is a team game, but there's a drawback to the team focus. Most people are queuing solo and want to play McCree, not Lucio. And the fantasy surrounding Overwatch is to love the heroes as characters, essentially, but the reality is being pressured either by the teammates or even by yourself or perceptions of what the meta is to fill into a much more smaller set of that roster, whether you want to or not. And yeah, that's completely true. So true that that is literally a point that we tried to address in our interview with Jeff Kaplan at BlizzCon in the first year of Overwatch's release, 2 years ago. My biggest issue with Blizzard's take on this is that they really want to give power to the players to shape their own experience. But without the structure set in place to make sure team comps and ranked are always reliable, what actually happens is that we have a reliably chaotic experience, doing the exact inverse of the thing that they're intending. They wanting to give more power to the players, but actually you're giving most of us far less. Because a percentage of players will just pick their favorite heroes no matter the situation. And because of that, it naturally forces other players to either have a worse experience because they'll play their favorite heroes too, and the team comp's bad, and you don't even get to enter the game, competitively speaking. Or, as even Jeff Kaplan admits to having to do himself, he doesn't get to play Junkrat, who's also one of my favorite heroes that I never get to play either. Instead, you fill the gaps in the team comp, either needing a tank or a healer or whatever, and that's not really making good on the expectations of ranked unless you already wanted to do that. But even then, it's a complete lottery whether you have even enough players willing to do that. A couple other things he mentioned, they're going to be looking into making it more clear why your SR goes up a lot or a little, or falls a lot or a little. Obviously, if you win, that's clear, but there's a long list of rule sets of how it works. The average SR of both teams. Are you decayed? Are you platinum or below? Then it has SR adjustments based on your performance. There's all sorts of wizardry going on, and he says that they believe that it does accurately identify your skill, which I have to say is something that we thought it accurately did forever, basically. It's always been very good at this. The problem is that isn't tantamount to having a good time or a good competitive experience. Just everyone being accurately ranked based on their skill level mechanically isn't everything. And in fact, it biases too much based on mechanics, making it harder for players with good, solid mechanics to be lower if their game sense is worse, which has always been a problem. Last 2 points, he mentions an issue with LFG that spans out to other things that have been said about the matchmaker. So for example, he says that they had focus groups like LFG, said the quality of games are always higher, but when they ask players if they use it, they say, no, it takes too long. When he says in reality, it doesn't take much longer than to find a normal game. And this is an argument that gets used for the role queue problem, where if you have too many players queuing for damage, their queue times will go through the roof. But he also says this for LFG as well. He says players claim they want a better experience with longer queue times, but then don't do that when we leave it up to them. As in, we already have an option that gives you a vastly better experience with LFG, and most people don't use it. Now, I think this is a little bit disingenuous, because the key part that he's missing out here is that group games in Overwatch are far harder. We have to admit this. The experience of playing in groups is much more rewarding, but it takes a ton more work and isn't rewarding in the SR sense. You're going to lose a lot. I know this from firsthand. I have been queuing with a lot of you guys who, by the way, I'm still looking to recruit even more players if you're interested to play in 6 stacks, looking for players that have peaked around lower GM. If you're interested in joining the server, send us a Twitter direct message with your player profile and SR, and then we'll give you an invite to get you in the rotation and try you out. So I'm not very happy with Blizzard taking this stance that, well, we tried, the player base just isn't choosing to have better games. That's not fair at all. The incentive structure or the systems in the game need to facilitate these things. Grouping is a hassle that doesn't get rewarded by your SR system. It should be no surprise that players aren't signing up to find groups. Instead, I'd like to see weekend 6-stack tournaments that are timed events, or just stop punishing groups. Guys, this could be everything for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. You're going to want to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.